Alright, since we're actually close to the end of the game, this next part and the beginning of the one after this will be dedicated to the side stuff that you do. Since this is a bit different, this DLC, you don't have to collect artifacts normally. You have to defeat a specific set of captains which are themed in each region, and after you defeat them, you collect the specific artifact and which is tied to new equipment that you get. And the major difference is that the equipment that you get is a collection of themes rotating around the elements of the game in terms of, elemental attacks. Fire, ice, poison, and I forgot what's the fourth one. And after you get all of that, you get to defeat a specific, super boss, quote-unquote, or captain. Again, all of these are technically pre-made. Like you mentioned in the first part, 3 of the captains in Kiritungol are fought automatically in the mission of the Thrall, but if you actually dispatch them during these particular missions, and if you do, the mission of the Thrall will actually be more simple and more streamlined. But other than that, in the other regions, you have to actually deal with them the proper normal way. And the gimmick is that each of them has a particular puzzle to them, meaning you cannot necessarily defeat all of them in one go in each region. You need to equip potentially one part of the equipment that gives you the edge. For example, a captain might be immune to almost completely everything except fire. And as such you need fire equipment to deal with that, which you can get for later on. So again, they incorporate a bit of puzzle elements to them in order to not make it too stale and, be a bit of freshness.
If I recall correctly, you had alluded to some ulterior plans with this DLC. I'm guessing originally what you had considered was trying to place this DLC sort of in the middle of the epilogue section of the main game before the end, since chronologically, I assume this all happens.
What happens at the very end of it. Ow.
It sounded like he said F you.
Well, no. Again, the closest you get to the orc swearing is replacing the word shit with rock. But there's that. The way they actually call out Eltariel is she-elf.
Like, to be fair, we've
more
never...
elegant than Trak or Talion.
Yeah, to be fair, we've never actually heard, like, the S word or the F word in Lord of the Rings.
Which is weird, because, okay, to be fair, yes, but those are not technically, M-rated, but this game is, they could have easily done that.
I guess this one's more due to the gore.
Yeah, most likely. I mean, it's more of a case of, they had the opportunity and just decided not to do it, I suppose.
I guess again, we never really heard those words uttered in the Jackson verse, so I guess one would wonder, would there really be much form or use to them?
Depends on the context. I can see a character like Torvin being able to do it.
I guess they wanted to try and be consistent with the Jackson verse overall and how their dialect is.
Probably, I guess.
The Exterminator.
Yeah, again,
He doesn't look like a Dalek.
Well, not really. This guy can move, without propellers on his feet. But yeah, basically
machine orcs, eh?
Well, those are part of the tribes, but in general, the orcs in each region will be particularly themed after something or someone, and have a mission to do something there. Like, for example, in this case, there might be, if I recall correctly, nature-themed orcs, quote-unquote, that are very, as mentioned, are here to actually defeat the machine tribe orcs. In another, it might be the complete opposite of that. You have to treat it a bit like, slightly, not identical, but the war between Zephyr and forgot its name, the bird, the machine bird level in Spyro 2, basically.
Too, the lore compendium of Gollum talks, of all things, about orc reproduction. I mean, according to the lore compendium, Tolkien wrote some stuff about it, and I'm like, huh, interesting.
Yeah, like I said, there is stuff that did not manage to get published actually in the books, but otherwise remained not necessarily even in the appendices because the appendices are canon, but essentially what could have been title concepts that just floated around, and the children of Tolkien decided to not incorporate in the books in any capacity.
So I know the general line of difference is the Tolkienverse and the Jacksonverse, though I do wonder, are there like two different companies or houses that reap the benefits from each of those, or are they still
really.
pretty
It's
much
still
collectively
the
under the
estate,
same umbrella?
It's still the estate in general. Even so, like there's not really, aside from the books, there's not really anything that established a completely different continuity that that separates from the movies, in general. At best, you get singular titles that try potentially to stay more close to the book, and even then, as noted by different reviews, they still really not do that. Even the Gollum game doesn't really do that. It then does all the original things.
So it's essentially just about I want to use the Jackson aesthetic. No, I want to use something different.
Basically, yeah, it's basically that. For example, by the time we're recording this, there's the Moria game that is supposed to be actually set after the events of Return of the King, including having John Rhys Davies voicing again Gimli in order to retake the Mines of Moria.
I will say, that sounds cool. I will say this, though. I think it really does show just how impactful the Jackson trilogy is that, it's to a point where an estate is like, this person is so useful. Let's forever categorize this under our umbrella, essentially.
It's regarded.
It can get potentially to a fault, but yeah, it only showcases how much of an impact it had.
It's kind of like the same. It's kind of like. I'm guessing it's a bit similar to Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z in comparison to the OG Dragon Ball manga. Where like the adaptation became so iconic that it's the version that people immediately think of.
I think I can one up in terms of being more fitting to what me and Joel were actually talking about. It's more of a case on how at the end of the 80s, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure introduces so many staples of the shonen genre that titles immediately after and way later still uses them to this day in terms of aesthetic, just by having their own stories and art styles.
That is pretty much on the point. It's like, and again, like, it's not every day when a specific iteration of a franchise becomes so iconic that it might as well be the mascot of stuff.
Many elves have been sent to Mordor, and each has met their end here. They come clad in formidable armor, wielding mighty weapons, and when they find an orc, they kill without mercy, until they find me.
Basically, this is the super boss we will actually face in the next part, talking about each of these particular artifacts that you collect after defeating these groups of orcs. Where was I?
I think a good example is like how.
Basically, it's kind of like it's basically the fact that each major attempt at a fantasy movie after the Peter Jackson movies of any kind try to still recapture that kind of aesthetic. We've seen it in Aragon, we've seen it in the Golden Compass.
Even Chronicles of Narnia was Disney specifically trying to get that Lord of the Rings money.
There were also stuff that we haven't seen, like what's it called? The Percy Jackson movies technically tried to be slightly similar, just with the urban setting, But basically, again, that's mostly because you have to remember the cultural impact also that it had on the cinema industry. Remember what I said, before those movies, fantasy movies were mostly seen as box office poison that at best would be okay in terms of, profit, and in reviews they probably would just be looked, just with a bit of a snooty nose from the critics. So this was actually a game changer. Again, kind of like Star Wars was at the end of the 70s. Go on, Jova.
Comparing my bout about how, the Jackson verse is essentially the definitive iteration of Lord of the Rings. I mean, to the point where it is what helped most people become familiar with it. It's comparable to say how the 80s versions of TMNT is pretty much considered the most iconic one because that is the aesthetic that a lot of iterations base stuff off of or go back to entirely in some regard.
And
Sometimes
also
it's a lot more.
a lot of copycats, so yeah.
That too, yeah. It's like, and it makes sense though because the 80s version of TMNT is what pretty much propelled the franchise into infinity.
Remember, before the 80s cartoon, it was just a niche comic that most people didn't even know existed.
To be fair, I wouldn't dismiss that so easily because, it was actually what gave rise to the indie comic book industry because it showcased the actual story of an underdog kind of, creators who had nothing to do. Kind of a bit like how Cave Story paved off the way of, indie games as a whole.
It was definitely a good
not as a maybe as a magnitude of different, later efforts, but not really also to be dismissed as, nothing really happened.
Okay, it was definitely a good underdog story, I will give you that. But I do hold that the 80s show catapulted it from just being an underdog
because of a target demographic. The original comic was supposed to be a parody and intended more for adults. So
it's interesting how that works out.
The
2003
did the 80s cartoon ever try to replicate how the first issue ends?
Yes.
With Shredder being bald by a
season one.
factor.
Season 1, the 2003 show too. The season 1 is basically an adaptation of the Mirage comics.
Oh wait, it's funny because the movie also does that too, and yet that was still a better way for Shredder to go than in the second movie.
The first
That one
sorry.
where it gets crushed under a pier.
No, that's the second one.
Yes.
Hold on, no, there's something on. I'll explain later.
Well, I was talking about what Jova said, but go on.
Okay. Basically, the first live-action movie is actually more modeled after the comics than the TV show, the 80s show, especially because they revert Raph back to his hothead anger issues persona that he's now known for.
They did take from the 80s series,
they did.
Different colored bandanas and some of their personality traits.
Yeah, whereas Rob Paulson's TMNT is more of a wise ass with, one-liners and shit.
I love how Rob Paulson can boast that he's voiced two of the Turtles now.
Yeah,
I remember seeing a video talking about the TMNT movies, and then what I heard is that the second movie, as a result of, actual parental complaints, had to tone down the violence.
See, the thing is, a lot of kids a lot of parents took their kids to see the movie because, well, the 80s show was the big thing at the time, right? It was as popular as Pokemon was in the late 90s. So little did they expect that the movie was more akin to the comics and therefore more mature and dark. So a lot of parents didn't like that, and so because to address those complaints, they made the second movie more like the 80s show. So it's one of those things where the second movie is not a good sequel to the first movie. However, if you just watch it as a live-action interpretation of the 80s show, it works fine. It's still a fun movie on its own rights, and it's not like the movie's completely silly. There's still an attempt to tell a story. There's still some down moments and stuff like that. It's just that it's not as dark as the first movie.
And then there's the third movie, which I don't think even
the third movie.
The only good thing in that is Casey Jones' actor, which works fine.
Well,
for me.
but that's the thing too. He does nothing in that movie. He's completely wasted.
One of his ancestors.
He does. He does. But once again, too, they don't really. It doesn't really matter. They barely do anything in that movie.
Well, I guess we can see the franchise ended on a better note, question mark, with TMNT 2007?
Didn't end it considering Michael Bay then did two movies.
Well, that one's not part of the original continuity.
I'm talking about the movie continuity. Well, the original movie continuity.
Because the 2007 movie... Sorry.
Technically, it didn't even end that much, because if I remember correctly, the movie ends with Karai basically tell,
Yes.
by the way, Shredder is coming back, goodbye.
Something along those lines, yeah. Now the thing about the 2007 movie is that it positions itself as the fourth movie to the live-action trilogy, even though that doesn't really make much sense, because if you actually take an objective look at it, it contradicts a lot of things. But whatever.
You mentioned the designs of a character, like the turtles being more slim.
No, I can tell you this too. The main issue with the 2007 movie is this. It feels like we're dropped in the middle of a story that already started 30 minutes ago, instead of being dropped at the beginning of the story, because we literally start with Leo somewhere in the Amazon jungle, and we never and there's never any major explanation, because Splinter sent me here to become a better leader. Okay, why? You might want to tell us what happened in between movies, guys. Like,
I think to me, TMNT 2007 feels like it's trying to go for a Ghostbusters 2 thing, where the heroes are kind of in retirement, and each one is off doing their own thing until something calls them back to action, essentially. That being said, the difference is, like, it forgot to have enough of a point like Ghostbusters 2 did. Like, Ghostbusters 2 is relatively simple. Ghostbusters have supposedly cleared house, but then there's a resurgence of ghosts due to the slime, so they have to return to the call. TMNT 2007, on the other hand, we think the Foot Clan may be back, and Splinter wants us to come when the time is right. Even though the time is arguably always right. Like, see, here's the difference. With Ghostbusters, it makes sense. They specifically go after ghosts. However, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles were superheroes, as in, they fought against all crime, not just the Foot Clan.
That's the problem, yeah.
The movie literally when the crime is still a thing.
The movie literally starts with the Turtles just basically, hanging out in the sewers doing nothing, being lazy, and Raph is the only one who's actually, become a vigilante and is trying to fight crime, and yet for some reason, Theo, the movie portrays that behavior as negative, even though that doesn't make a lick of sense.
But Pedro, they were doing important stuff, like Donnie went into tech support and Mikey became a turtle mascot.
I feel like the Nostalgia Critic reaction to that bit where Leo says, this is finally Raph putting the risk of our family playing the vigilante, and the critic's reaction was perfect. Yes, that is what you're supposed to do. In fact, I'm pretty sure that's the definition of a superhero, actually.
I mean, again, that is like, look, I don't even hate TMNT 2007. Like, it does have some good stuff. I actually,
the animation is great and the action is great. But and by the way, Theo. Here's one thing you need to tell. Guess who directed that movie?
I think you already told me. Someone from something we already seen.
The director of the Ratchet and Clank movie.
Yeah, you did told me. He's also the writer, because that will make sense. Well, it makes all those sense. So.
Yes.
Okay then.
Sorry.
The messed up thing is, like, well, for the company that made TMNT 2007, that movie made them a lot of money. It was the Astro Boy movie that killed them, and I would argue the Astro Boy movie was.
Except the Astro Boy movie is actually good. The Astro Boy movie is actually good, as we've said in our commentary. So.
Is the 2007 movie the only iteration where James Arnold Taylor voiced Leo?
Yes.
How bizarre.
He's a good. He basically does his Ratchet voice too. He basically gives him his Ratchet voice.
It's just that you think they would, recycle him at some point or one of the later series.
Well, that's the thing here. With every new iteration, they always get new voice actors, basically.
Pretty much. Again, that's why I say I think Rob Paulson is the only actor who can boast he's been around as a main turtle more than once.
See, the way the TMNT franchise works is they don't have consistent voice actors like you are the new Leo for the next 10 years or some shit. No. Instead, every time the franchise gets rebooted, they also get a new cast of voices.
I mean, that I understand because it's supposed to be even separate continuities, so to an extent I can understand some degree. But if the 2007 movie posted itself, as a continuation
Yes.
live-action movie,
I know what you're gonna say.
they get at least someone from that.
Yeah, but and yeah,
Okay.
for some reason they didn't even try to get the actors from the live-action movies.
Okay, like, here's the thing about the 2007 movie. Yes, it is confirmed, it is in continuity with the live-action movie.
Even though that doesn't make a lick
That
of sense,
being
but
said-
whatever. Go
That
on.
being said, you would be forgiven for not noticing that because, well, as Fallon Hearts pointed out, I think in our Incredible Hulk commentary, that you have to pay attention to the details on, like, one of the walls or stuff to know for certain that it's in continuity. Now, nowadays, it's definitely confirmed it's in continuity, but I wouldn't be surprised if back then people were debating whether or not that was
It's
the case if
complete-
they even had the inkling.
You see, Teo, it's complete horseshit because the characters don't behave anyway in the way they've ever behaved in the previous movies anyway. So it's not.
Doesn't help that they sound also younger
Yeah,
than
it's
the live-action
honestly, Teo, I'm honestly.
Don't you see, traveling through time gave them euthanizing.
It's not Samurai Jack.
powers.
Go.
I'm honestly convinced that that connection was made at the last minute just to draw in older fans to come back and see it.
Like, I'll admit, as a kid, when the TMNT 2007 movie came about, like, I was familiar with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles thanks to the 2003 show, but I had no inkling whatsoever that
Yeah.
that movie was connected to the original
basic-
trilogy of films based off of the marketing from it.
Yeah, as for the Bay movies, Teo, that's a whole nother slew where the characters look
Yeah.
absolutely. Basically, they Sonic Boomified the characters with a lot of
Hey,
du-
remember
with
when
a
they
lot
were
of
supposed
shit
to be-
on top.
Remember when they were
Aliens,
supposed to be aliens?
And they have like a throwaway line going up saying, "Oh, that would be silly."
That would be stupid, wouldn't it?
Well, I mean, I think it was them acknowledging just how severe the backlash was.
My favorite line from the few bits that I've seen is the not Shredder, the game it was supposed to be, but people complained because it was basically whitewashing the character. Basically explaining his plan very stupidly a la Bond, and then saying that he's doing this to become rich, or more appropriately, stupid rich.
Honestly, Tio, my favorite bit of that scene was how obviously ADR'd that bit was. They had to constantly replace "I will do this" to
Yeah.
"the Shredder will do this."
Here's the bit. Sorry.
Yeah, so
He-
go on.
Here's the basic gist of it too. Like when it comes to trying to, because the 2003 show was actually creative directed by Peter Laird, one of the creators of the original Mirage comics. So that's the one you watch if you want the more accurate to the original Vision
He
experience.
told me that apparently it's also his favorite one. So
Yeah, it's also like it's, even though I will always have nostalgia for the 80s show, it's the better of the two shows.
Our victories, as any army of our size must. But our triumphs are a mere shadow of what we could accomplish if we were unleashed. And our masters know this. That is why they keep us down. We must not fear them. It is they who
Is
seek
this
to
all
fear us.
British or Australian?
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
no,
yeah,
no, this is Middle Earth, so it's
New
whatever name we
Zealand.
can make. No, I need to think. We need to think of the Middle Earth equivalents of Britain or
I'm not
Australia.
entirely sure about that. Go
Oh
on,
man,
Tova.
I'm not the most familiar with all the land names, but yeah, no. Despite me growing up with the 2003 series, I'll admit I have really grown very acclimated to the 80s series.
It's because the
Granted,
80s series is one of those series where if you just want to have some fun, that's where you go to. If you want something more story driven, you go for the 2003 show. But the 2003 show is one of those shows where it's just so much fun to watch because
The 80 series, if I recall correctly, was also created in a time where, serialized cartoon for children did not have too much in mind the idea of, big continuity or
No.
major story arcs, but instead wanted to just promote the next toy package.
Well, to be fair, the 80s show,
stuff like
yeah.
G.I. Joe, for example.
To be fair, the 80s show did that too. It's just that it did it better than
Well,
most.
that's what I was referencing because if I recall correctly, the Ghostbusters cartoon was actually one of the few that was actually trying to break the mold with that because it was written by J. Michael Straczynski, and then they fired him.
Okay, the dealio with shows was pretty much, I think, even as early as the 60s. A lot of times, shows were being made to sell toys, and like, once you reached 100, you were pretty much done. Scooby-Doo was like the sole exception until, like, say, the time of the DuckTales series, if I recall correctly, where starting with that, series were being made with more than just selling toys in mind. I think TMNT was maybe at a stage where toy sales was still important, but thanks to the changing idea with shows, TMNT would endure for quite a while. And, well, the rest is history.
It's one of those things where it's just like, like the creators did the best what they could at the time, considering the.
And you know what? Look, I do get people, including Laird, who would prefer the original vision. But I have looked at some of the original comics, and okay, I don't want to say they're bad or anything, but I can kind of get why the 80s show took its liberties here and
Whatever
there.
bad they are, Jove, I get the idea they cannot really worse than when Archie held the license. The few bits that I seen from those kind of days leave a lot to be desired in terms of both artwork and stories.
And I kid you not, the original comic can get pretty dang weird, especially with the reveal that April O'Neil is actually a comic book character brought to life by a comic drawer.
Remember, Joe, that the original, starting already from the first issue, the main idea was supposed to be actually a parody of comic books in general. So eventually going full meta probably was the natural evolution of what they were probably intending to.
It was a weird combination. It was supposed to be a parody, but it was also a parody that had a very dead serious tone at times.
Well, yeah, because
it came off
parodying
like that.
was the Bronze Age of comics, particularly the Frank Miller stories of both Batman Year One and his relaunch of Daredevil. So
it's just such an interesting combination now. Laird did not dig the 80s series for having a much more lighthearted tone, yet when you get down to it, that series was supposed to be a parody of somewhat leniency. But, you know, I'm not in his mindset.
I guess it's probably eventually the ultimate thing that can happen, you know, to a franchise. If you allowed it to go it for so long, you know, it will eventually see all the... If I remember correctly, yeah, I think there was actually one of the issues, sorry, one of the issues, but, you know, one of the numbered issues of Youngblood in the 90s from Rob Liefeld actually had something similar going on to this, not in terms of, you know, story, but talking about this particular, you know, genre shift, depending on the adaptation, where one of the characters, which is not really supposed, if you don't know anything about Youngblood, first of all, bless you, because, you know, you're really not missing that much. But it's supposed to be Rob Liefeld's take on, quote-unquote, the next generation of heroes, which include a lot of, you know, cool, admittedly cool, but very useless kind of guns, a lot of fight scenes that really have no, you know, proper pacing, bad artwork, and in general a gritty tone. Very gritty. A character in one of the later issues actually commits suicide in a very gratuitous way, and it's very poor in taste to boot, you know. But to give you the idea, it's supposed to be, you know, a dark type of story. So, of course, in one of the issues, another one of the characters signs a contract deal with Hollywood without even looking at what is supposed to happen, thinking that it's going to be based on his life, you know, as a superhero and everything. And then it turns out, you know, it's a show for children, and he properly gets pissed about it. So I wonder if they wanted to talk about something similar to that.
That kind of does sound like Laird's story. Like, granted, I do think he took it too far, given how he has done some of its take-backs at the 80s series, especially.
Yeah, I remember that she telling me something about one of the crossover specials of basically being nothing.
Yes.
Like, oh, you guys are too silly.
The entire purpose of Turtles Forever 2 is to mock and market how ridiculous 80s show is and how much better the 2003 show. It's literally what Linkara, you know, the whole thing that Linkara said about how in the crossover you need to honor both things that you're crossing over with, right? That's not what the Turtles Forever does. Turtles Forever exists entirely for the purpose of Peter Laird to shit on the 80s show as much as possible, and how much better and cooler the 2003
yes.
Turtles are. No, it's like no, I understand the point because it's not a good crossover. No, not at all.
Like, yes, yeah.
Also, it's technically a waste of what's the term?
Animation.
No, creativity. Because let me put it this way. Because I can also understand a bit the point, but a clever kind of writer like Grant Morrison will do instead something like take the concept of what's supposed to be silly about that kind of era, reinvent it in a particular way, and claim that it was super genius all along and fits in the modern time. I know that it's a bit weird explaining like that, but basically that was his process that he did for basically almost all of the weird, stupid shit that happened in the Silver Age of DC Comics, that he essentially recanonized in modern setting by giving a context, no matter how implausible that sounds. I think probably a better approach would have been that.
Yeah.
Also, I'm not sure how worse it can be compared to the recent Thundercats crossover episode with Teen Titans Go, where not only they get the 2010-2011 protagonist voice actor to basically validate the reboot and said you don't have to listen to the hater, but they also shit on the fact that the voice actor of the original version of Panther, the original cartoon, passed away. Isn't it so funny?
See, let me put it this way.
Yeah, they got rightfully blasted for that.
See, here's the thing. As someone who, I'm the one here who grew up watching the 80s show, so allow me to tell you this too. I wouldn't even have any problem with the Turtles Forever making fun of the show, because there's plenty of great things you can use. Like, for example, when one of the funny things about the 80s show too is that a lot of times there's mistakes where the wrong voice comes out of a certain character, right?
Yeah, I remember also coloring too with the bandana.
So if you want to make fun of the 80s show, make a joke like that. Have one of the 80s turtles talk through another person's voice, and the two Frozen Free turtles ask, "Wait, what the fuck? Why did you sound like that?" Something like that, right? You could also like another thing here is that in the 80s show, all the foot soldiers were robots. Because the mandate from the executives,
the violence,
they couldn't kill anybody. Again, you could have had so that the foot soldiers, unlike the 2003 show, are robots when the 80s foot soldiers, and then the free turtles are like, wait, the foot soldiers are robots in your universe? Well, yeah, you don't think we would actually kill somebody, would you? You see, these kinds of jokes write themselves, and they don't even capitalize on that. Like, it would be so easy to make. That's a good way to poke fun at the 80s show without shitting on it.
From what I understand, future crossovers with the 80s one kind of suffers from the same problem.
Yes and no. It's a bit complicated. To give you an idea, too, like the crossover between the 80s Turtles and the 2012 Turtles. There's a point where one of the 80s Turtles refuses to fight because, as they say, well, I don't want to use my weapons, I don't want to hurt anybody, and I'm like, what? What? And I can tell you too, that's not how the 80s Turtles behave at all.
That's
honestly, that live action movie.
That sounds even worse than a lot of the stuff from Turtles Forever, because I think even they started fighting with their weapons eventually, whereas in that one you just mentioned, they didn't even do that. No,
well, to address Teo's question, yes, they stopped using their weapons, Teo, but they still hurt the foot soldiers, to be fair.
What I mean is that to the point of, nonsensical, because I remember one specific criticism said there's a scene where they're literally trapped in a net and Leo doesn't even bother to unsheath his katana.
Oh, that. Yes. Again, they had to do that because of mandates and shit. It's a shame, I agree. That being said, like I said, if you just take I still argue that if you take the second movie for what it is, I still think it's a perfectly fine cartoony live-action movie, kind of like The Mask, like if you just watch it as a fun cartoon brought into live-action type movie, it's a very enjoyable movie for what it is.
I'm honestly curious, to be fair, speaking of that, that actually fits more what you were saying before about the original source material not being as famous. Sure, not to be that it was, completely obscure and everything, it's technically the second major original IP of Dark Horse Comics, so nothing to be scoffed about after Hellboy. But back then, I don't even remember what kind of prompted trying to make an adaptation of that, especially one before Hellboy, weird.
Oh my god, he's literally a special snowflake.
Yep. And trust me,
This guy dropping a hot take on the elves.
and trust me, this is one of the most bullshit obvious fights that you have to deal with, because if I remember correctly, his specific weakness is tied to fire, which at this point you probably don't have. I forgot if it's more of a thing of I made this fight later and I regrouped it here for the purpose of making it consistent. But otherwise, being a defender, he can counter the execution, which is bullshit to begin with. You cannot vault on him too much. He's immune to the light, vigilant against health. So again, you're probably wondering what are you supposed to do. The best course of action is basically, don't worry, Dweebs, like I said, you cannot soft lock yourself to anything, but the best course of action, summon your bodyguard, because that will keep him busy and you can actually, gank up on him that way. So trust me, Dweebs, it's not a matter of, you being soft locked and you have to be scared because someone is immune to everything, but it's more of a literal case of being a puzzle type of boss that you have to, decipher.
I've never liked those kinds of enemies where they just think, oh, I know, all that stuff you've been building up, let's have it so you can't use literally any of it, and you have to literally spam attacks to beat him.
Like I said, it's a bit more complicated with that, and more of a test in order to, see how you can work with selective tools. Again, considering these developers did first-person shooters before this, I can easily understand where they're coming from, because a lot of, FPS, particularly old school, tend to also do this, like having bosses more ideally being defeated with one specific type of weapon more than others, So there is that.
What do the elves face in Mordor? The tribes, ordered and regimented, an abomination. The perfect state of orcdom is chaos. That is where our strength lies. Tribes are an attempt to impose order where there should be none. It cuts us down as surely as an elven blade.
Yes, Pedro?
Well, just to follow up on what Jovo was saying earlier about enjoying the 80s show. No, see, the thing is, let me put it this way. If you it's one of those things where watching the show again, it reminds you of a simpler time when you were watching cartoons. Like, for example, when there's an episode where Michelangelo and the Shredder swap bodies. And and I'm sure you can imagine, those kinds of old-fashioned cartoon premises from older cartoons we used to see when we were kids. It gives you that cozy feeling when you're watching those good old-fashioned cartoons that just love to be fun, that kind of stuff.
I cannot really relate, but I can understand what you're saying.
Going back to the lair
like you said,
thing,
Pedro, I grew up with serialized animes,
Oh, sure.
Even the more silly one, like Guru Guru, even still had, more of an overarching story. And
Sure, I understand.
So I'm just, grew up with that. Anyway,
bringing things back to the lair thing, I can kind of get it. You had a specific vision in mind. And then something that in some ways can feel like the exact opposite of your vision is what actually makes your franchise popular. I can get being bitter about that. That being said, I still think he took his hatred way too far. Let me put it like this. If I were in his position, I would first celebrate the fact that my work has essentially gotten to that godly status where I will pretty much be set to life for it.
Yeah.
And okay, while I might take some umbrage with it, I would just say, it's a different universe. I wouldn't spend almost half a show kind of hating it, which is just going to leave a bitter taste in the long run.
It would even be. I think the main problem is that Nickelodeon, ever since they bought the IP, they basically pretend the 2003 show doesn't even exist.
They seem to have milked only the 80s.
Yeah, if they acknowledged that show more and gave Mirage fans some love, then there wouldn't be a problem. But Nickelodeon, for whatever reason, decided that only their stuff plus the 80s show counts now. And okay, to their credit, they recently re-released the entire 2003 show on DVD, so they're technically still acknowledging it, but marketing-wise, not really.
I guess we'll have to see if they will allow Konami to do a second Kawabunga collection style with the GameCube games, which I think are based on the 2003 show.
If Konami shows interest in Nickelodeon, because Nickelodeon is basically just getting free money, so I doubt that they would object.
Honestly,
Honestly,
Jova TV, that kind of gives what you said earlier, that kind of gives the ones from the 2012 crossover even less of an excuse. Because at least you can say Peter Laird had some motivation behind it. The ones in the 2012 crossover just seem to come out of nowhere from the specific...
Okay, to be fair...
creative artists.
Oh, well, Dwibs, I never said that crossover was my favorite either, though. I mean, granted, the 2012 series, I will give it credit. It's more serious, but that one actually takes a lot of cues from the 80s series.
Okay,
like,
I want to...
We've got Bebop and Rocksteady. We've even got Baxter Stockman turning into a fly mutant in that one.
I know we've gone over our time, but let me just say one more quick thing before we go, just to correct this. Okay, to be fair, Lives, I blame that crossover's problems more on incompetence rather than malice. To be fair,
that too, yeah.
Remember, do not attribute to malice what can be easily attributed to stupidity.
See you for the next part where we actually finish properly these fights and also get the epic conclusion of the DLC.
See ya.
Awesome.
Right.